The morning sun gleamed off the tall glass windows of the downtown bank as Steven Seagal walked in, dressed in his usual casual elegance. It was just another day for most people. Clerks stamping paperwork, customers lining up for their transactions. But for Steven, it was about a simple task: depositing a check. He carried himself with calm confidence, aware of the attention his presence often attracted, but never letting it define him. As he approached the counter, a bank manager behind the desk froze for a fraction of a second. His eyes narrowed, and a dismissive smirk appeared on his face. Something in Steven's appearance, his tattoos, his casual attire, his quiet intensity seemed to trigger a judgment. Without greeting or offering professional courtesy, the manager snatched the check and began scrutinizing it with an almost exaggerated suspicion. "What's this? Are you serious?" The manager muttered under his breath, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. He flipped the check around as if expecting it to reveal some hidden secret. Then, in a shocking move, he tore the edge of it, crumpling it slightly. Gasps rippled through the small crowd of onlookers. Steven didn't react immediately. He remained composed, his eyes locking calmly with the manager's. He could feel the tension thickening in the air, like static electricity before a storm. Around him, people began to murmur, some reaching for their phones to record what was unfolding. It was a moment that seemed small at first, but carried the weight of injustice, arrogance, and prejudice all in one instant. Then came the first whispers. Did he just tear it? Why is he treating him like that? Steven finally spoke, his voice firm but measured, a voice that demanded attention without aggression. "Sir, please check the information before damaging anything. That is a valid check." The manager scoffed, barely containing his disdain. But little did he know, his reaction had already planted the seed of his own regret. Every eye in the bank was watching. Every camera phone in the crowd had begun recording. And seconds from now, the truth would hit him harder than he could imagine. The tension in the bank was palpable now, thick enough to be cut with a knife. Steven Seagal stood calmly at the counter, maintaining his usual composed posture, while the bank manager's eyes burned with unprofessional suspicion. He held Steven's check, like it was a ticking bomb, flipping it from side to side with exaggerated caution. "Are you sure this is real?" the manager muttered, louder this time, so that everyone in the line could hear. His words carried a hint of disdain, a subtle prejudice that didn't go unnoticed by the other customers. Some froze, unsure whether to step in, while others pulled out their phones, sensing a viral moment unfolding. Steven's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lose control. His calm aura alone made the manager's behavior look even more ridiculous. But the manager wasn't finished. With a deliberate, almost theatrical motion, he began tearing the corner of the check. A small rip, yet enough to draw gasps from nearby onlookers. One woman in line whispered, "Did he just?" Another man started recording. The entire bank had become a stage, and the manager, in his arrogance, had unwittingly turned into the villain. Steven finally broke the silence. "Sir, I suggest you verify the check before damaging it further. It is completely legitimate." His voice was calm, but carried a quiet authority that made heads turn. The manager smirked, trying to mask his embarrassment, yet every eye in the room was locked on him. The manager's arrogance seemed untouchable at that moment, but little did he know that the world around him was already witnessing the seeds of his downfall. Now imagine this scene. You're standing there, in line just a few feet from Steven Seagal. The check is in the manager's hand, and he's intentionally destroying it. Your heart pounds in disbelief. If I were there, I'd feel a rush of adrenaline mixed with anger. I'd think, I can't just watch this. Someone has to step up. Maybe I approach politely, maybe I record everything. But I will not let this slide unnoticed. Now it's your turn. If you were in that exact situation, in your own words, what would you do? Would you stay calm like Steven, let your composure speak, or confront the manager immediately? Comment below and tell us your reaction, honestly, as if you were in that moment. Back at the counter, the manager, clearly flustered by the growing murmurs and camera flashes, tried to regain control. He waved a hand dismissively at the crowd. "I know what I'm doing," he muttered. But the uncertainty in his eyes betrayed him. Steven's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the manager's flustered gestures. Every second Stephen remained composed, the manager looked smaller, more desperate, more exposed. His arrogance, born of prejudice, was now crumbling under the weight of dignity. By now, several bystanders had begun recording with their phones. Some whispered to friends, some stared openly in disbelief. The tension was almost unbearable. Every second the manager hesitated, the crowd collectively held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Stephen decided to let the situation play out, trusting the truth to reveal itself. His calmness was a weapon of its own, silent, unyielding, unshakable. And then, with a subtle glance, he allowed a small hint of irony to cross his expression, as if to say, "Your arrogance is already your undoing." The manager, oblivious to the power of that quiet glance, reached for the check again, ready to tear it further. But in that brief pause, it was clear to everyone that his position of authority was fragile. What he thought was control was actually chaos in slow motion, and the audience, both in the bank and now online, via recordings, could sense it. It was in that moment, that infinitesimal pause, that the seed for the manager's regret was planted. He didn't yet know how completely the truth would expose him, but seconds later, every lie, every prejudice, every arrogant assumption he had made would come crashing down like a house of cards. The murmurs in the bank had grown louder. Every customer, every employee seemed to lean in, watching the standoff unfold. Steven Seagal remained calm, but there was a subtle tension in the air, the kind that makes your heart race without a sound. The bank manager, sensing eyes on him, grew defensive. He straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and tried to appear composed, but the flicker of unease in his eyes betrayed him. "Listen, I don't have time for this," the manager barked, shoving the check back towards Stephen, already crumpled from his earlier actions. "If this is valid, fine, but I won't be taken advantage of." His tone was sharp, biting, and laced with thinly veiled prejudice. Stephen, as always, stayed composed. His deep, measured voice cut through the tension. "Sir, this check is perfectly legitimate. I suggest you stop making assumptions and verify the details properly." The manager bristled, but his words began to falter as he noticed the growing number of witnesses filming his actions. Phones were raised on every side, capturing every motion, every flicker of arrogance on his face. The power he thought he held was slipping through his fingers, and he knew it. The customers in line whispered to one another. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others tried to remain neutral, uncertain whether to intervene or stay silent. But Stephen's calmness had already shifted the energy in the room. What had started as a simple bank transaction was now a lesson in composure, integrity, and accountability. Stephen took a deliberate breath and let his presence speak for itself. His eyes met the manager's, silently conveying authority without aggression. The manager, in contrast, was fidgeting, checking his notes repeatedly, trying to convince himself he was in control. And then, the moment that would define the next few seconds came. A young man in line whispered loudly enough for the manager to hear, "Sir, maybe you should double-check before destroying someone else's property." The manager's face flushed crimson, the murmurs grew, and even other bank employees began glancing nervously toward their colleague. Now, imagine you are standing there, just feet away from the counter. The air is heavy with tension. Every eye in the bank is on the manager, every phone recording the moment. If I were Steven Seagal, I would stay calm, letting my composure speak louder than words. I'd know that losing my temper would only feed his arrogance. In my mind, I'd be thinking, let the truth come out. Let him expose himself. Silence and patience are stronger than anger. But if I were a witness, standing in line with a phone in my hand, I'd feel my heart pounding. I'd be asking myself, do I step in verbally? Do I stay silent? Do I record everything and make sure the world sees this? Now it's your turn. If you were standing in that bank, what would you do? Would you confront the manager, stay calm like Stephen, or record everything and wait for justice to unfold? Write it in the comments as if you were there, honestly. The manager's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the check again. He was desperate to regain control, but realized that every move he made was being scrutinized. Even his colleagues were exchanging glances, silently judging his behavior. The arrogance he had relied upon for so long was evaporating in real time, replaced by the heavy weight of accountability. Stephen didn't rush him. Instead, he allowed the manager to dig his own hole. Every second the manager hesitated, every shaky breath he took, strengthened Stephen's silent authority. The balance of power had shifted, and the audience, both in the bank and watching through videos, could feel it. The line of customers now leaned in, some subtly recording with their phones, others whispering advice or observations. The tension had transformed into a spectacle, a real-time lesson in humility versus prejudice. Stephen's calm presence was magnetic. It drew the crowd's attention and shifted the energy completely. By the time the manager finally stopped, holding the check limply in his hand, it was clear to everyone in the room. He had underestimated the power of composure, patience, and truth. Seconds from now, everything would change, and the manager would have no choice but to face the consequences of his actions. The murmurs in the bank had grown into a low, steady hum of disbelief. Every customer now had their eyes on the manager and Steven Seagal, sensing that this was no ordinary transaction. Phones were raised everywhere, capturing each subtle movement. The tension had transformed into anticipation, and the entire branch felt like a theater waiting for the climax of a play. Stephen remained composed. His posture was unyielding, calm, and confident. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture aggressively. His presence alone was commanding attention, forcing the bank manager to feel smaller with every second. The manager, on the other hand, fidgeted under the gaze of dozens of witnesses. His smirk had disappeared, replaced by a forced, nervous twitch. One brave bystander, a young woman waiting in line, finally spoke up. "Excuse me, sir. Maybe you should double-check before tearing up someone else's property," she said, her voice firm yet polite. The manager's head snapped toward her, and for a moment, his arrogance wavered. The words had pierced his bubble of assumed authority. Encouraged by her courage, another customer stepped forward. "Yeah, it seems unfair. Why destroy a valid check without verifying it?" The whispers in the bank grew louder. The other patrons, sensing that injustice was unfolding, subtly shifted their stance, some raising their phones, some leaning in to witness what was happening. Stephen spoke again, his tone calm but firm. "I assure you, this check is completely legitimate. Please verify before taking further action." His words carried weight. The manager's protests began to falter. The truth was slowly creeping into the room, and the manager could feel it. He realized, perhaps too late, that his behavior was being witnessed by more than just the crowd. It was being recorded, scrutinized, and documented. Now imagine you are standing in that bank, right behind Stephen. The tension is so thick you can feel it pressing against your chest. The manager has been caught in his arrogance, and witnesses are stepping in. You see him faltering, the check trembling in his hand. If I were there as a bystander, I'd feel my heartbeat race. I'd be thinking, do I step forward? Do I calmly support Stephen's position? Or do I simply record everything and make sure the truth spreads? I might even mutter under my breath, hoping my voice could add weight to what's clearly right. I'd feel both fear and courage at the same time. The fear of confrontation, the courage to defend fairness. Now it's your turn. Imagine yourself standing in that line. If you were there, would you stay silent, intervene politely, or make sure every action was documented for accountability? Comment your reaction, as if you were part of that exact moment. Back at the counter, the manager's face had turned a deep shade of red. The bank employees were shifting uncomfortably, glancing nervously at him. Even his own voice sounded uncertain. Every word he had spoken with arrogance now seemed hollow, and the calm authority of Steven Seagal and the collective presence of witnesses was swallowing his power whole. Stephen didn't need to raise his voice or threaten anyone. His silence and composure had done the work for him. Each time a customer stepped up or whispered in support, the manager became more exposed. What he thought was his control was, in reality, collapsing under the weight of truth and the collective moral gaze of the crowd. The cameras, the whispers, and the growing attention all converged in a single moment of clarity. The manager's prejudice was no longer private. It was public. Every small action, every sneer, every torn corner of that check had been noticed, recorded, and judged. And then it happened. A subtle pause, almost imperceptible, but enough for the manager to realize he had gone too far. The rippling tension in the room reached its peak, and all eyes were now on him. Seconds from now, everything would be revealed. The truth that Stephen had allowed to quietly build was about to hit, and the consequences would be unavoidable. The air in the bank had reached a near electrifying intensity. Every customer, every employee, was now holding their breath. Steven Seagal had remained calm, poised, and unshakable, but the tension around the counter was palpable. The manager's arrogance, which had been so brazen just moments ago, was now unraveling in real time. Every movement, every twitch of his hand, revealed his growing unease. Stephen leaned slightly forward, his eyes steady, and spoke once more. "Sir, I suggest you verify the check properly. All the details are correct, and this is a legitimate transaction. There is no reason to destroy it." His voice carried authority, calmness, and quiet warning all at once. The manager hesitated. He looked at the check, then back at Stephen, then toward the witnesses who had begun whispering among themselves and filming the scene. He had built this moment in his mind, imagining that his power and prejudice would intimidate anyone who dared approach him. But now, he was confronted by a combination of truth, composure, and public scrutiny. A force far greater than his arrogance could withstand. One of the bank employees, a mid-level assistant who had been silently observing, stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, I've checked the system," she said, her voice trembling slightly with nervousness and authority combined. "The check is completely valid. There's no reason it should have been torn or questioned in this manner." A collective gasp echoed through the bank. Cameras clicked, phones recorded. The manager's face went pale. His smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a flicker of panic and shock. Seconds earlier, he had believed he was in control. Now, the reality of his actions slammed into him like a wave he could not escape. Now imagine you are in that exact moment, standing in line just a few feet away. You've watched the manager destroy the check, seen the tension in the room, and now you hear the truth confirmed by the system. If I were there, I'd feel a mix of shock, relief, and vindication. My mind would race. Finally, the truth is out. All his arrogance and prejudice are exposed, and the victim of his unfairness has remained calm the whole time. I'd be holding my phone ready to record, but also thinking of how important it is to let the moment speak for itself. What about you? If you were standing there, would you step forward to support the truth? Quietly film the moment or just watch in disbelief? Write your reaction as if you were there. Honestly, the manager's hands trembled as he dropped the torn corner of the check onto the counter. Every second that had passed, he had underestimated the power of calm authority and public observation. He had assumed that his status, his position, and his prejudice would intimidate Steven Seagal. Instead, the very same actions had exposed him to universal scrutiny. Steven leaned back slightly, his composure unbroken. His expression didn't gloat, didn't mock, and didn't celebrate. It was simply the calm look of someone who knew the truth would reveal itself in time. Every murmur, every glance, every recording now worked in his favor. The manager had become a cautionary example, a living lesson in arrogance and prejudice. The customers in line began whispering among themselves. "Can you believe he actually tore the check? I can't believe he treated him like that." Thank God Stephen stayed calm. Phones clicked and whirred as the scene was captured in slow motion, ready to be shared across social media within seconds. And in that moment, the manager's reality hit him harder than any words could. The check was legitimate, the victim composed, and the witnesses unwavering. Seconds ago, he had believed himself untouchable. Now he was humiliated, exposed, and powerless. The truth had struck like lightning, and there was no going back. Stephen's calm authority, the witnesses' courage, and the undeniable evidence of justice had converged. The room had witnessed an instant shift, from arrogance and prejudice to truth and accountability. It was a moment that would be replayed countless times, a lesson in dignity and patience, and a stark reminder of how quickly arrogance can crumble under the weight of truth. The bank was silent, except for the faint whir of cameras and the quiet murmurs of witnesses sharing their disbelief. The manager, who only moments ago had wielded his arrogance like a shield, now stood frozen. His face had drained of color, and the slight tremor in his hands betrayed his growing panic. He had underestimated Steven Seagal, underestimated truth itself, and most importantly, underestimated the power of being observed by the public. Stephen remained calm, composed, almost serene. His gaze was steady, unwavering, and filled with quiet authority. He had not shouted. He had not raised his voice. He had not attempted to humiliate the manager. Yet in those very moments, the balance of power had shifted completely. The manager's authority had crumbled, replaced by the undeniable weight of evidence, dignity, and collective judgment. The crowd now fully realized the injustice. Several bystanders had begun filming every moment, capturing the manager's trembling hands, the torn check, and Stephen's composed demeanor. Social media notifications would begin to buzz within minutes. Someone in the bank was already live, streaming, and comments were beginning to pour in online. This was no longer a private humiliation. It was about to become a viral lesson in humility. The manager's voice finally broke the silence, stammering, trying to reclaim authority. I thought. But his words fell flat. They sounded small, defensive, and more importantly, insincere. Every whisper, every camera phone, and every witness now reinforced a single truth. He had acted unjustly, and the world was watching. Stephen's calm, collected response had turned the entire situation against the manager without a single raised hand. The irony was almost poetic. The man who had sought to assert power through prejudice now stood completely powerless. The witnesses exchanged nods and hushed comments, amazed at the seamless display of integrity and restraint. Now, imagine standing there in that bank just a few feet from the counter. You've watched a man in authority destroy someone else's property, witnessed the victim remain composed, and now seen the truth fully revealed. The manager is humiliated, shaking, and everyone's attention is on him. If I were there as a witness, I'd feel a mix of adrenaline and awe. I'd be thinking, I can't believe what I just saw. Stephen stayed calm the entire time. The manager's arrogance is now exposed. I need to record this. This is justice in action. I'd probably pull out my phone, capture every second, and prepare to share it so the world could witness what humility and dignity look like. What about you? If you were standing there, would you step forward to support Stephen? Would you record the moment? Or would you just watch in awe as the manager faces his consequences? Comment, honestly, as if you were part of that exact moment. Within seconds, the scene inside the bank transformed into a story for the world. People posted videos online with captions like, "Watch this racist manager get exposed by Seagal'S calm authority." And integrity wins the moment arrogance collapses. Within minutes, hundreds of views became thousands, and thousands became tens of thousands. Within an hour, clips were shared across social media platforms with commentators praising Stephen's restraint and criticizing the manager's prejudice. The manager tried to gather himself, but the damage was done. His colleagues shook their heads, some exchanging awkward glances, others trying not to draw attention. His reputation had been shattered, not just in the bank, but in the eyes of the online world. Stephen, meanwhile, simply collected the repaired check, his composure intact. He offered no gloating smile, no verbal jab. His dignity alone had spoken volumes. The audience, both in the bank and online, was left in awe, not just of the injustice revealed, but of the way it had been handled, calm, strategic, and dignified. By the time the manager left the counter, the viral impact was already underway. Witnesses shared their perspectives online, clips, reactions, and stories about how quickly arrogance can crumble under the weight of truth. What had started as a small act of prejudice had become a global lesson in accountability, integrity, and the power of remaining composed in the face of injustice. Seconds earlier, the manager had believed he was untouchable. Moments later, the world watched him exposed, humbled, and humiliated. And all of it had been captured on camera, destined to serve as a reminder of what happens when arrogance meets patience, truth, and dignity. The scene at the bank had settled into a stunned silence. The manager, once brimming with arrogance, shuffled toward his office, head lowered, face red with embarrassment. The customers, still in awe, whispered excitedly, some replaying videos on their phones, others sharing the clips live on social media. Within minutes, the story had already begun to spread beyond the walls of that single branch. Steven Seagal, calm and composed as ever, collected the now intact check from a bank employee who had quickly helped restore it. There was no need for celebration or confrontation. His actions had already spoken volumes. Integrity, patience, and composure had triumphed over prejudice and arrogance, and the world was watching. The first videos began trending almost immediately. Clips titled, "Steven Seagal versus Racist Bank Manager, Fati Instant Justice," and "When Calm Wins Over Arrogance" were shared tens of thousands of times. Comments flooded in from every corner of the globe. People praised Steven's restraint, his dignity, and the undeniable lesson that arrogance and prejudice always face consequences when confronted with truth. Social media was ablaze with admiration. Users were posting their own reactions, sharing the story in forums, and debating the manager's actions versus Steven's calm authority. What had been a minor incident in a bank branch had now become a global discussion about integrity, humility, and the consequences of underestimating others. Yet Steven did not gloat. He didn't mock the manager or revel in the embarrassment. Instead, he offered a quiet message through his calm composure. Respect and dignity speak louder than arrogance. Actions rooted in prejudice and ego will always crumble when confronted by patience, truth, and integrity. The bank itself was left to handle the fallout. Management reprimanded the manager, reinforcing policies about professionalism and anti-discrimination. But beyond the formal consequences, the story had already cemented itself in public memory. Videos, reactions, and discussions circulated rapidly, turning a single act of injustice into a powerful lesson for millions. Now, imagine yourself watching this unfold live. You've seen someone act unfairly, witnessed the calm response of a victim, and watched as truth and patience exposed arrogance. If I were standing there, I'd feel a mix of awe and empowerment. My heart would race, my mind would be spinning. This is exactly how integrity wins. Calm, dignity, and patience. Those are the real powers. The manager's arrogance is exposed and the world is seeing justice in action. If you were there, what would your reaction be? Would you share the story online? Step forward to support justice, or simply reflect on the lesson in humility? Comment as if you were witnessing this exact moment, and be honest about your feelings. By the end of the day, the story had gone viral. Millions had watched Steven's composed response, the manager's humiliation, and the swift moral victory of truth over prejudice. News outlets and social media accounts across the world shared the clips, praising the lesson embedded in what could have been just another bank dispute. It was a moment of real-world teaching. Patience, dignity, and moral courage triumph over arrogance and prejudice every time. The lesson was clear for anyone watching. Do not judge by appearances. Do not act on assumptions. And most importantly, respect, patience, and integrity always carry weight far greater than ego or bias. Steven Seagal walked out of the bank without a word, leaving behind a stunned crowd, viral footage, and a lesson that would resonate worldwide. Every phone in the building had recorded it, every witness would tell the story, and millions online had already learned the power of calm dignity over hasty arrogance. If you believe no one should ever be judged by appearance or treated unfairly, like this video, Colorado meant your first reaction using, "If I were there, I would." And subscribe for more inspiring real-life stories of courage, dignity, and truth prevailing over arrogance.